Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Spotlight session on Gender-Transformative DRR. I'm Tania Hamayu, moderator for today's session. We would like to welcome Caitlyn Wilson. If you could kindly come on stage for your welcome remarks. She's the Assistant Secretary Humanitarian for Australia Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just make sure I've got that right. Thank you very much, Tanya, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today. Thank you very much for the opportunity for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade to deliver opening remarks. It's such an important session. Quick apologies from our Head of Humanitarian, James Gilling, who was originally down to provide remarks, and there is so much going on as a co-host of the conference that he sends his apologies and kindly asked me to step in. But of course, this is a set of issues close to all of our hearts, and I'm really delighted to be here. I've already provided some remarks earlier this week, so some of you will already have heard some of our common interests and themes. So if this sounds a bit familiar, I just want to keep reinforcing how important Australia believes it is to make sure that effective disaster risk reduction is inclusive. When we say inclusive, it's inclusive of all groups, including those who are marginalised, ensuring meaningful participation both in policy, in consultation and in designing of activities. We know from lived experience in Australia, as well as working with partners overseas, that groups such as women and girls, peoples with disabilities, Indigenous peoples, the elderly, youth and other communities can often be excluded, both in consideration of policy directions and in decision-making and in design. I've just come from, for those of you who might have been to the plenary this morning on resilient infrastructure, I was really struck by the very active discussion from panellists about ensuring inclusion and really looking at very practical ways from different experience in connecting communities, community voice, different groups to national and higher level decisions, policy frameworks and resourcing, so that connection from the bottom up, as they said, making sure that participation is established before, during and after, and that governance mechanisms are in place to make sure those connections are really clear and very well established before and after a disaster hits was really striking for me. So some great examples from the region and equally from Australia in some of our recent experience. From the Australian side, we very much see women and girls, since our current session is particularly focused on gender in DRR, we want to recognise women and girls as leaders, first responders and agents of change. It's all too easy to portray women and girls as victims and survivors, which of course is true, but it's not the full story. We really want to make sure that the whole person is recognised. Similarly, when we talk about other groups where we have a very active focus on inclusion for people with disabilities, we know you have unique knowledge and experience. And again, earlier this week, I've already heard some really important and fabulous perspectives from very active representatives and community groups, again, including in Australia, with a very real lived experience of living through recent floods, fires, drought, what hasn't worked and how communities and individuals are really advocating for change and the really great ideas that are coming out of that. in turn, when we make sure that the way that we approach disaster risk reduction, preparedness and resilience are inclusive, and that includes how we set up consultation mechanisms, how we go out to communities, how we ensure the listening and active participation outside of a disaster. It really is about effectiveness. It's not just about equity, it's about a better approach, both during the building of resilience and during a disaster and afterwards. For Australia, we also see this year on the advocacy front as a really great opportunity and a pivotal year. I know that a number of us, including no doubt many of you in this room, feel that the 66th Commission on the Status of Women broke new ground in the negotiations and the final declaration this year, exploring links between gender, climate change, environment and disaster risks. And I'm very much struck as well as we continue to talk about the increasing threat of climate, the impacts on frequency and severity of weather and other hazards, that when we talk about linkages and nexus, that we are really starting to talk about a whole other set of linkages. Of course, historically, we may have talked more about conflict, humanitarian development. Now we're really thinking about a whole lot of intersectionality, gender, climate, environment and disaster. We were also able to advance some of this advocacy and adopting common positions at the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in Bali in May. And of course, this week is a really great opportunity to keep the theme going. For those of you who haven't been out to our fabulous inclusion wall, please go and take a look, and if you can, make a pledge. That's a really great way of, again, getting a bit of attention and helping individuals to mobilise. On the international side, Australia is really proud to partner with a range of specific gender-focused initiatives. Particularly and most recently, we are supporting UN Women to deliver the Women's Resilience to Disasters program in the Pacific. For those of you who aren't familiar with this program, it seeks to enhance the capability of women and to empower women to lead Pacific solutions to prevent, prepare for and recover from disasters. So we've been really pleased to support the launch of this, and particularly a new Women's Resilience to Disasters Knowledge Hub, which is a common internet platform to help share knowledge, good practice, and to build capacity. So do check that out. It's a really good opportunity. I've touched a little bit on the domestic side. I'm sure, again, we'll hear some fantastic examples from our wonderful panel, who all, again, have very unique and practical experience, and again, drawing on strong linkages at the community level. So I'm very happy now to pass to the panel and really look forward to this session. Thank you.
Women are drivers of change, and they can be instrumental in bringing that change, the desired change we all want to see. Thank you very much, Caitlyn. Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here today. I'm Tanya Humayun. I'm Advisor cum Program Manager, Gender and Child Cell, National Disaster Management Authority, Government of Pakistan. I'm the moderator for today's session. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Turrbal, Yagira people of the land on which the conference held, and pay our respect to their elders, past and present. We also acknowledge the Turrbal, Jagira, and Yagira people continuing culture and contribution to the life of Brisbane region. In the spirit of reconciliation, we extend our acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, and recognize their continuing connection to land, sea, water, and community. We pay respect to all elders, past, present, and future. Today's discussion on gender transformative DRR builds on the 66th session, outcome of the 66th session of the Commission on Status of Women, which was held earlier this year. Among other things, it also called for creation of gender action plan for the Sendai framework. The Bali Agenda for Resilience and co-chair summary from the Global Platform Disaster Risk Reduction called on specific targets and timelines to achieve gender balance and gender action plan to achieve Sendai framework. The Sendai framework should be established. UN Women, UNDRR, and DFAT also develop a companion paper, which is available for today's session. Please kindly download it, and you can share it with your colleagues and your network. During this 60-minute session, we would request you, if you have any specific priority area you think that should be included in Gender Action Plan, kindly just use the APMCDRR 2022 app and just add to that chat function, and we would definitely look into it. I take this opportunity to share my personal experience from Pakistan. Coming from a resource-strapped country that is not only disaster-prone, but faced number of complex emergencies every year. The current floods 2022 played havoc with thousands of lives. Almost 33 million people are displaced and affected by these floods. The worst ever climate catastrophe. Since 2005 mega earthquake in Pakistan and 2010 floods, government of Pakistan has undertaken a step to first formulate National Disaster Management Act and then establishment of National Disaster Management Authority. After 2010 floods, there was a need which was created that a separate dedicated structure should be established to look after the needs and concerns of vulnerable groups during pre-post disasters. So Gender and Child Cell was established in 2010, and this comes directly under the Prime Minister's office. Major steps undertaken by government under this cell, which was established in 2010, was development of policy documents, programs which are focused on vulnerable population. So since then, most of the policies and programs which were developed are gender transformative, which includes guidelines and policy documents, SOPs on GBV, sexual and reproductive health, guidelines of vulnerable groups, and so on and so forth. So since then, after the formulation of these guidelines and translation at all levels, we've been able to save thousands of lives. If we can compare it from 2005 earthquake, where almost 3.2 million people were affected. In 2010 floods, almost 3.5 million people were affected, and this 2022 floods, 33 million of people are affected. So I think we've contributed, as government, we've contributed a lot to bring that desired change for the gender transformative DRR policies to be implemented at all levels to save thousands of children, women, and adolescent girls from these catastrophes. Thank you. Now I would request for my panelists, I would introduce them. We have with us Dr. Deveen Sengpal, Deputy Director General, Gender Equality and Economic Development, Ministry of Women Affairs. Then we have Ms. Norma Yeating, Executive Director of Kiribati Family Health Association, Ms. Clement Manuri, Secretary General of Solomon Islands Red Cross, Ms. Caroline Kitioni, Learning Coordinator, Shifting the Power Coalition, based in Fiji, working across 6 Pacific Island countries. Thank you very much. I would request if you could kindly introduce yourselves.
Good morning, delegate, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Darwin Sengpal. I'm Deputy Director General of the Gender Equality and Economic Development of the Ministry of Women's Affairs, Cambodia. My task is to work to provide technical support to the line ministry on mainstream gender into the national policy, program, and strategy, and also including promote women in leadership position. Thank you.
Melody, my name is Norma Yeating, Executive Director of the Kiribati Family Health Association, and KIFA is a member of the International Planned Parenthood Federation, or IPPF. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Clement Manuri, the current Secretary General of Solomonel Red Cross. I started off with Red Cross 20 years ago as a young unemployed volunteer and now the Secretary General. Thank you.
Walakanaka everyone, as Learning Coordinator of the Shifting the Power Coalition, and although I am based in Fiji, I do work across 6 Pacific Island countries, 7 including Australia as a Pacific Island Forum country member. And as Learning Coordinator, I support the work of the Young Women's Steering Committee within the coalition, as well as the Pacific Island Feminist Alliance for Climate Justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would pose my first question to Dr. Deveen Sengpal and Ms. Norma Yeating. What opportunities do stakeholders have to shift towards more gender transformative disaster risk reduction? If you could kindly share your experience.
Thank you, Tanya, for the question. For us in Cambodia, we have a strong gender responsive policy framework and also mechanism. For example, we have the Ministry of Women Affairs, who is the government institution working to promote the status of women and girls and other vulnerable groups to respond to gender mainstreaming in their policy, in their sector strategy, as well as the promote women leadership. And we also have the gender mainstreaming action group in the line ministry, and we also have the gender mainstreaming action plan in the sector. So, however, we have this gender responsive policy framework and mechanism, but we need to transform this. Transform to what? As you may know, that gender equality need to be more institutionalized into the system, into the government institution, and make sure that it is for everyone business. It's not separate or our own matter. It's for everyone matter. So, in this context, in Cambodia, we work out through and in deep in the gender statistic, planning and budgeting, and M&E cycle of the land ministry and sector. Like the other sector, disaster risk reduction agenda, when we move into this transformative approach, that means that we move in deep in to work out more in the gender statistic in the DRR, and gender responsive budgeting and planning, as well as the M&E in this sector. So this allows us to see more opportunity as well as more specific gender issue and needs in our disaster risk management. For example, when we work to improve gender statistics in our exercise, we work out more with the National Institute of Statistics and the planning and statistic department within the line ministry. And this allows us to see more specific issue and data, gap, and evidence for our advocacy work as well as the policy development. This is one point. And for both gender focal point and technical team who work on gender matter, feel more happy to see the specific area of work as what they can do and what are the key benefits for their sector to address this issue. This also leads to us to have a strong data and evidence to support our gender responsive budgeting when we go to work and negotiate as well as lobby with the Ministry of Economic and Finance to get the budget for implement it. And for the M&E work, we can know more how to develop a clear and specific baseline and target in terms of M&E indicator. Yeah, and one more point that we are looking for this opportunity for the exercise, that we can see more ownership and accountability of stakeholder and leader in each sector relevant to DRR agenda, because they see this specific issue when they see the need and value of their sector, and they know how to respond it accordingly based on the specific need of the women and girls and other vulnerable group. Respond to this DRR. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your Cambodia-specific experience. And I think it's great that you've institutionalized gender transformative DRR across the country. Thank you very much. Now I would request Ms. Norma Yeating for your response to our question.
Thank you. I just want to highlight some of the good examples of our key stakeholders that are very important in trying to advance and support us on the agenda that we have on table for discussion. And first, in 2021 in Kiribati, last year, we have this new regulation that was passed on the National Disaster Risk Management and Climate Change. In this regulation, there was a new committee that was formed. It was called the Kiribati National Expert Group, and as highlighted and stipulated in the regulation, part 8 and number 48 and 39. Page 39 of the regulation, the roles and functions of this committee is to monitor and coordinate the DRR and climate change programs at the national level. Members of the KNIC group are invited from government ministries, communities, and also from non-government organizations. And I'm glad to share that Kiribati Family Health Association is also a member of the KNIC. And maybe this is one classic example where we can see that the sexual reproductive health is intersected into the climate change programs. The other group that I would like to flag here is the importance of the faith-based organizations back in Kiribati. In Kiribati, we have 14 different church groups, and within their own bureaucracy and settings, very authoritative, and the members of the church are very highly respect the decisions of their church. Within these church groups, we also have well-established women organizations that are very, very active and very committed. So I think this is the faith-based organizations in Kiribati. About 94% of the population belong to the church groups. So I think this is one key partner or key stakeholder in the advancement of the agenda we are trying to discuss and trying to resolve and address. Yeah, lastly, I think it is also important to note and the continuation to need the support of the donor partners in trying to provide funding, technical and funding support to the countries in respect of and in regard to trying to advance the effort in DRR and climate change programs. I think these are some of of course we cannot add on to the list of who are key stakeholders that are important and that can have a good impact, an impact on the agenda we are trying to advance right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yeating. Engagement and participation of faith-based organization is very important, I think, and they can play their key important role in bringing disaster risk reduction, gender-specific, gender-transformative. We will now showcase a video produced by UN Women's Resilience to Disasters Program in Pacific, which highlights the positive changes for individuals, communities, and countries with gender-transformative approach, and where women are supported to lead resilience-building efforts. Thank you.
If you don't have women's leadership, you don't have innovation, you don't have inclusion, and you don't have accountability.
Having women as leaders for disaster risk assessment team, for example, can draw out different voices that highlight different dimensions of disaster risk.
Ang mga kababaihan niya, nangiisipin agad, konsultasyon. Konsulta muna ang mga nanay, konsulta muna ang komunidad, ano bang dapat gawin.
আমরা নারী নেতৃত্ব চাই প্রত্যেকটা প্রজেক্টে প্রত্যেকটা জায়গায় বলে নারী চাই কিন্তু এই নারীগুলোকে প্রথম থেকে বের করে নিয়ে আসতে হবে
You're talking about accelerating progress. You can only accelerate it if you have all the stakeholders and that it's inclusive, that it's meaningful, that we're all part of accelerating that progress.
Women leadership can be advanced by introducing platforms where they can contribute, but most importantly, those that are already in leadership role where they can be further supported.
It's about talking to young women directly to find out what it is that they need in terms of support, in terms of the resources. And in order to effectively engage with young women, you have to talk to them directly about what it is that they need. It's about giving them that space to be able to design, to lead on their own advocacy issues. And it's really to give that space to young women to be able to come together and to learn from each other.
We have to do a lot more in terms of finance and technical assistance and shared capacities so that we can escalate even more.
The Women's Resilience to Disasters Leadership Toolkit assesses the level of women's leadership in disaster and climate resilience. It identifies opportunities that can be accelerated. In Vanuatu, the toolkit identified opportunities to strengthen women's leadership through increased funding, improved capacity support, and quality partnerships.
As highlighted in the video, women in all their diversities have expertise. As recognized in the video, It's already highlighted there that women in all their diversity have expertise, knowledge, and skills to build resilience and lead disaster risk reduction efforts at all levels. Yet too often they are left out of decision making. And now I would request Mr. Clement Manuri and Caroline Kittione, can you share one best practice or example of the impact that diverse women's engagement has had in the development and implementation of disaster risk reduction strategies?
Yeah, thank you. I think the video have summarized well some of the best practices in our countries. Women must be positioned as stakeholders when dealing with disaster risk reduction. Often we look at women as vulnerable and beneficiaries in the community without realizing that there are lots of experience that are in there that we should tap in order to get our work when it comes to DRR in the communities to perform and meet the expectation. One of the best practice that was practiced in our community projects were, there is also empowerment workshops going on alongside the DRR activities. There are, in the past, women are not coming forward to give what they have. So in order to, by empowering them, they turn up and give very positive feedback and also contribute a lot to the DRR activities in the communities. Also, when working in the communities, there are, or most of the times, women are seen as women. You prepare lunch for the workshop participants, and it's a normal thing in our communities, and also even women feel that it's their responsibility to be in the kitchen preparing lunch for the men who are sitting relaxing in the workshop venue. So in trying to solve this, what we do is we ask the men to do the cooking for the workshop participant, and it worked really well. The male they're in the kitchen preparing lunch for the workshop, while the female or the women are out there participating fully in the workshops and also trainings that are happening in the communities. The other best practice is to institutionalize, allow women to come forward and participate. We have our, the constitution of the organization, mainly all the Red Cross societies have this constitution which they follow. And one of them, for example, for Solomonel Red Cross, the Article 14 of our constitution on national composition, or the composition of our national board, there is a part in there that says there must be, or there should be 50% representation of national board. So it's been followed, and that is the one of the areas that policy makers, constitution, and all these legal people should make sure that these things are in there, because sometimes that's where people are not being, women are not being involved, vulnerable people are not being involved in these very important discussions. Thank you.
In 2015, when TC-PAM barreled through Vanuatu, the women felt, and these are women from rural and remote communities, they felt disconnected from early warning systems and preparedness processes. And since then, with the establishment of Women in Tok Tok Together and Women Weta Mweta, coalition partner Action Aid Vanuatu have actually been supporting Nivan women to learn weather patterns, to understand the reports coming up from the Bureau of Meteorology. I can't be the only one having trouble with that word. And to also develop warning messages that go out into the communities. But Action Aid Vanuatu have also supported Nivan women to be able to engage in disaster management spaces as a member of the communications cluster within the wider disaster management cluster system. And that's being transformative. That's what I understand to be transformative action. And it's really highlighting the importance of investing in women's leadership and their agency. But as an extension of that point, it's also important to enable the spaces that allow women to come together and to share what they've learned. And in 2020, learning from the first women-led Nivan response to Tropical Cyclone Harold, the Shifting the Power Coalition supported 6 women leaders in Fiji from the Central, the Western, and Northern Division to be able to carry out emergency rapid response assessments and to also distribute disaster reliefs that included food, water, hygiene, and sanitary kits, as well as non-food items, to 225 households, and this included emergency care packages for 50 women with disabilities through the Fiji Disabled People's Federation's National Emergency Operations Centers. And what this really learns is that when you support women-led emergency teams on the ground, they're able to meet and identify both the short-term and long-term recovery efforts, as well as to identify how to respond to the intersecting impacts of COVID-19 at the time. And what I want you to take away from this is that when you listen and when you learn and engage with existing networks, particularly existing women's networks, and when you resource them with the appropriate resources, and when we talk about appropriate resources, it's not going to be the same for everyone. You have to work directly with the women on the ground to identify what those resources are. And so when you support them with appropriate resources and with capacity building programs to be able to engage in systematic data collection and understand the different multiple and intersecting hazards, you're also understanding the socioeconomic vulnerabilities of different groups of people, and you're also be able to understand, what it is that they need to be able to respond better to disasters. And this can also strengthen information and data sharing between national level stakeholders and the community mobilizers who understand and who know best what's happening on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Participation and capacity building. Women must be positioned as active stakeholder. Now I would request our participants who are sitting here today and online, if you could, in your particular role, what one action you think should be made part of the Gender Action Plan? What one pledge you think should, one pledge you think should, in your specific role, can be used as gender-transformative DRR. So I would request if you can just share your pledges on a wall, a pledge wall outside or virtually as well. And I would also request if a few of you would like to come and share your pledges with the rest of the participants here. If you could kindly volunteer yourself and would like to share your pledge for one specific action for gender's transformative DRR. Sorry. If you would, one or two volunteers, if you could kindly raise your hands and come on the stage, please. You're okay, or you want to come here? Okay.
here. Good morning and to everyone. This is Ramesh from India, and basically we are working among the rural women. So as know that in the rural area, that in our context, the rural woman is illiterate. So the most of the IC material has been developed for the literate person. So one thing is that at the disaster risk reduction and the gender-based resources for the knowledge transformation, for the knowledge dissemination, this is the vital thing, the how we can make responsive, make knowledgeable to the rural women who they are illiterate. And as we have established one knowledge transformation, knowledge sharing, that if anybody has experience about the DRR and they are speaking in English, so we have some people who knows English to a local language, like in Hindi or Maithili, and they are giving, and we are organizing the virtual meeting for them. And that's the very fruitful result that they are knowing what's happening regarding the DRI at the global level, regarding at the community level, at the national and international level. So that's the initiative. And if I want to know more about how we can improve the capacity of our rural women. Thank you.
One action to implement gender transformative DRR, your role.
Thank you very much. My name is Abia Akram. I'm from Pakistan and representing organizations of persons with disabilities. Thank you very much to all the panelists for sharing your rich experiences. My pledge is like nothing about us without us, because we have to see like the shrinking space of the CSOs, the gender organizations, and when we talk about the organizations of women and girls with disabilities, they are not visible in the data, in the surveys, in the emergency response. So that's really important to count them. It's very important to take their voices in a meaningful way, not only counting on the numbers, but what are the sustainable plans we are looking, how we are supporting in the emergency, at the same time the disaster risk response policies, which needs to be gender inclusive. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. One last.
Hello there, my name is Jamie Morgan-Besser and I'm with the Australasian Women in Emergencies Network. So it would be, I want to take my time if I can to just promote that the OR Network promotes, supports and recognises women in emergencies and disaster resilience. And I want to begin by acknowledging the incredible panel that we have up here to share their experience and stories. Now, on the 10th of October, we're celebrating Australasian Women in Emergencies Day. And this is an opportunity to, again, recognise and celebrate women that come from a range of spaces, emergency services, from the community, from not-for-profit organisations, those who work, volunteer and study in the space, businesses, schools, government and agencies, universities. These are people. We want to acknowledge the people and the work that they're doing on the 10th of October. And I will continue to do everything I can as the Vice President of the OR Network to continue to promote and celebrate. And I pledge that on the 10th of October we'll be doing that, and I hope that you can join us too. I would recommend you look at our website, awenetwork.org.au, and celebrate alongside each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would request, if anyone is left, please kindly register your pledge at the wall outside, pledge wall outside the venue, and you can do it virtually as well. Thank you very much for your inputs. Now I would come towards the conclusion of this session, my last question to my panelists would be one action you think should be made part of gender action plan. You think that what is one priority area, one focused area you think should be made part of gender action plan?
Thank you for the question. For me, I have many action plans, but you allow me to say only one. So I have to prioritize among the prioritized one. So I think that we, as the key actor who working on gender, especially now we're talking about gender transformative in DRR. So we need all of the key actors accountable, acknowledge the gender issue at the core issue, and it is the critical part of the leadership, and make sure that women and all vulnerable groups participate in all the process of governance, as well as in the decision making. I like the word that you have been highlighted, nothing about us is without us. Yeah, this is I would like to say that meaningful participation of women, especially in the decision making at all levels, even at the national, at the provincial, at the community level, is very critical and meaningful for reducing and managing the disaster risk. Thank you.
Women participation in decision making. Thank you. Ms. Norma Yeating, would you like to share your thoughts on?
Okay, likewise, I also have a list, but only one to share. Yeah, I would like to see and to be taken as one of the priority areas in the Sendai development framework to include sexual reproductive health as a very important one effective strategy in the effort of DRR. Because from my point of view, and maybe the IPPF and member associations of the IPPF, we believe that through the sexual reproductive health program and services, we do provide programs that will empower women in terms of family planning, also in terms of trying to address the gender inequalities, and in addressing the harmful social norms that often weaken the resilience of women during in trying to address and the impact of climate change. Not only that, through the sexual reproductive health, not that we are trying to address the inequalities, gender inequalities, but at the same time, it will provide capacity for women to be able to be part and to participate at all levels in their communities, and to be recognized as active members of their society, and they should be able to take at all levels to be part of the designing, planning, decision making, and implementation of programs. So, in this respect, I thought that the effort in the DRR, if we push our agenda and try to move to a more gender balanced status for our women, I think that is what the agenda is all about in this session, trying to recognize and give as much support as we can to the women so that they are active, the participation can be recognized in the DRR effort as well. Thank you.
Yes, sexual and reproductive health, and again, women participation at all levels. Now I would request Mr. Clement Manuri, if you could kindly share your thoughts.
Okay, my 1 minute. The target G of the Sunday framework aim to substantially increase the availability of access to multi-hazard early warning system and DRR information. So my point is to the government and also policy makers should seek to engage with recognized the platform and network of communities and local partners working on the multi-hazard early warning systems initiatives. This can be harnessed through legal policy and change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caitlyn.
Always the pressure when I'm the last to go. But yeah, this week we've been talking about sustainability in our approaches to disaster management. And I think when we talk about disaster sustainability, we need to be very clear that we're talking about the next generation of leaders as well. And so the investment of young women, of diverse young women, needs to be at the forefront of our talks around sustainability. And and I'm being very specific on young women because when we talk about youth, the default is the man, the male youth, our male youth counterpart. And so we need to be pushing and investing in young women's leadership in disaster management spaces, and really moving away from the idea that we're leaders of tomorrow. No, because I think, and I believe that young women are showing out there in this room even that we're leading the way today. And so the investment in young women's leadership is the call that I would like to make, and to really address the gaps for young women of all diversities, including young women with disabilities, young women within the LGBTIQ community, and really work with existing young women's networks and support their leadership within the disaster management spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One last point from my side as well. I think gender-responsive investment in gender-responsive investment or gender-responsive budgeting should be made part of Gender Action Plan for Sendai framework. Women-specific finances should be available for livelihood, wash, nutrition, health. So it should be cross-cutting. So some money or some resources should be allocated at institutional level for actions to be taken under gender-responsive DRR. Thank you very much. With this, we would like to conclude our session for today's Gender Transformative Spotlight. I would like to thank all my participants who are here today with us and online, and my honorable members who've shared their success stories, best practices from their countries. Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to thank our organizers, UN Women, DFAT, and UNIDRR for hosting us today in this event. Thank you very much.
Women leaders are transforming the way we prepare for disasters. By working with communities and using a holistic approach to reducing disaster risk, women are nurturing resilience across the Asia-Pacific region. Disaster risk reduction aims to prevent new and reduce existing disaster risk, protecting our development gains from being wiped out in future disasters. While still a field dominated by men, women are leading disaster risk reduction efforts across the region and fundamentally changing the way governments collaborate with civil society, business, and other organizations. From early warning systems for tsunamis to better land transport design that will withstand the climate crisis, women are working with communities to strengthen their resilience. The Women's International Network for Disaster Risk Reduction celebrates the diversity of women leaders working at all levels to reduce disaster risk. We're supporting a community of women leaders who will help even more women take their seats at the table. WIN-DRR is open to anyone working in disaster risk reduction who wants to see more diversity across disaster risk reduction decision-making. Join the Women's International Network for Disaster Risk Reduction today.